Hi, everyone. My name is Kayla Flanagan from the ACLU of Illinois, and I'm here today with our Advocacy and Intergovernmental Affairs Director, Khadine Bennett, to walk through some of the victories and future challenges that came out of the 2021 legislative session in Springfield. So we saw a challenging year this session, with the pandemic moving most of the work virtual, meaning lobbyists were unable to do their typical in-person session days until the last few days of May. We started off the year with a lame duck session in January, where we saw the passage of an omnibus policing and criminal justice bill championed by the Legislative Black Caucus. Khadine, could you talk a little bit about the Safety Act and how the implementation of that bill is going?
Yeah, thanks so much, Kayla. So the Safety Act was, as you mentioned, part of the Black Caucus's pillar that dealt with what we saw this summer, which was police brutality, where it felt like every day there was a new story of law enforcement officers killing or harming Black and brown folks throughout the country. There was a pandemic, and for some people, it was the first time they realized how broken all of our systems are. And the caucus wanted to take some kind of action to really move our state forward. So the Safety Act, as it was called, was a bill that was focused on policing, criminal justice, and violence prevention issues. We were involved in the drafting of some of those pieces of the Safety Act bill. Some of the policing-related changes included increasing, raising the standard for when law enforcement can use force, so limiting the use of deadly force, limiting the use of force generally. It accounted for some of the things we saw that was happening to protesters, so really limiting when law enforcement officers can use force against protesters. It did things like get rid of the requirement that individuals have to file an affidavit before they can make complaints against law enforcement. And then it also really took a huge turn in terms of ending cash bail in Illinois, and that provision goes into effect in about 3 years from now. So in terms of how it's going, so as you know, the first step is to pass the bill. The second pass is the implementation, which is the most difficult part sometimes. But it means for us that we're making sure that we're developing materials with community partners where possible to get the word out, so you know what to expect under this new law. And then we also want to make sure that we're working to keep track of what's happening in different parts of the state to make sure that law enforcement is actually following those rules. One thing that happened after lame duck session was that there was a trailer to the Safety Act. It did some cleanup language, but it also had a couple of rollbacks. So one of those was with law enforcement. They were not allowed to review body camera footage before they did their reports. That was changed to allow them to do it except for certain situations of force. While we were not happy with that, we are still of the opinion that it's a good first step. One thing I would recommend people do if you're interested in the Safety Act is to tell your legislator, if you haven't done it already, that you support policing and criminal justice reform, because that sets the stage for us to take action later on these issues.
I think that'll be a common refrain throughout, is
probably
legislators take action. And it sounds like the Safety Act was a really important first step in session that's continuing to move on. So moving on to the main event, the main part of the 2021 legislative session kicked off in March, and we saw 3 of the ACLU of Illinois' key bills that were championed by us and our partners make it through the state legislature. Can you talk a little bit about these important victories and who else we can thank for making these wins possible?
Yeah, so the first one I'd start with is our Keeping Youth Safe and Healthy Act, Senate Bill 818. And that bill updates our woefully inadequate sexual health education law. So it builds on our current sexual health education standards in Illinois to include a comprehensive toolbox of knowledge and skills on topics including anatomy and physiology, adolescent growth and development, pregnancy and reproduction, healthy relationships, personal safety, identity, and STIs, including HIV. This information will support youth in making responsible and informed decisions about their health and well-being throughout their lives. The bill, which is really good that it does this, removes outdating, stigmatizing language, especially to folks who are pregnant and parenting, and for folks who are LGBTQIA. And it's inclusive and affirming of all identities. If schools teach sexual health education, then these standards will apply to the curriculum. It also includes a data collection component to support implementation of these standards, because we want to know what schools are teaching throughout the state. While this bill doesn't mandate sexual health education, our goal through implementation efforts is to work with all schools to incorporate these updated and necessary standards in the education they provide to their students, because it's education all young people deserve, and we hear from young people that they really want to have access to this information. So we were a part of a broad coalition of organizations who worked on this. Our sponsors in the Senate were Senator Villafalam and Senator Villanueva, and in the House, Rep. Lilly and Rep. Willis were our two main folks. So very excited that that bill is going to be law, and folks in Illinois, young people especially, would be benefited by it. Our second bill is a bill that would, it's House Bill 1063. We call it our HIV decrim bill. So in Illinois law, we treat HIV differently from any other communicable disease, and we're criminalizing a whole class of people, even when their conduct poses little or no risk of HIV. So the law in the books is titled criminal transmission of HIV, but there's actually no requirement of transmission under the law. So that means somebody who didn't actually transmit HIV could face the threat of arrest, prosecution, and incarceration because they're a person living with HIV. So the legislation repealed this harmful law, and it treats HIV like any other chronic disease. And we believe there's no reason to single out people living with HIV as potential criminals, especially now that HIV is a treatable, manageable condition. And, we're committed to, getting rid of these old laws that over criminalize folks. So we're really excited that that bill is now law. We worked in coalition with folks from the AIDS Foundation of Chicago and Equality Illinois on this bill. Our House sponsor was Rep. Ammons. Our Senate sponsor was Senator Peters, and we're really glad this bad law is off the books. The next one is our bill to protect household privacy, where House Bill 2553. So almost everyone watching this probably has either a Ring, Alexa, Google Nest. We can have a separate conversation about privacy of those devices. But what this bill does is that it provides that information that's stored in or transmitted by household electronic devices can't be obtained by law enforcement agencies without a warrant, or unless there's one of the narrow exceptions in place. So if the law enforcement were to obtain this information without a warrant, or if there's no exception, then that information can't be inadmissible in any court proceedings at all. And we also have a provision requiring that the information retained has to be destroyed in a short period of time, unless there is reasonable suspicion that the information contains evidence of criminal activity or the info is relevant to an ongoing investigation. This bill is really important to us. This is one of many privacy bills we've put in place, having limitations on law enforcement's access to our information. We believe that what happens in your home stays in your home. It's kind of like Vegas, except we can't really go very much because of COVID. Yeah, so it's just really important for us to have this protection in place. So our sponsors of this bill were Senator Castro in the Senate and Rep. Ann Williams in the House. So we're very excited that these three initiatives are law.
Sounds like some big wins this year. I know I've personally been thinking about the digital devices in my house since starting to work at the ACLU of Illinois. So many things you might not think of in terms of privacy, but it's really important. Well, unfortunately, we had some legislative initiatives that weren't passed this session, but we'll still continue on with them. So could you talk a little bit about the bills that will continue to be discussed and any next steps on our initiatives?
Yeah, and just a tip for folks. So we're in the first year of a 2-year legislative cycle. So that means that while we want all of our bills to pass by May, the year that we introduce them, there are some bills that would need more time. And these 3 bills are bills like those. So the other opportunities for them to move would be in October when we have a veto session, and then next year. So we have another full session where these bills can still be moving. So one of those bills is our bill to remove barriers to people's ability to change their names because they have a felony background. So that's House Bill 2542. Illinois' name change law is one of the most restrictive in the nation. We're one of 12 states prohibiting name changes for people on registries, and one of only 2 states prohibiting name changes for people who with identity theft convictions. Currently, Illinoisans with felony convictions can change their name until 10 years after the end of their sentence. The bill will bring Illinois in line with the majority of other states and helps trans and gender expansive people and survivors of human trafficking live safer and more authentic lives by removing this 10-year waiting period and a lifetime ban. It also has a judicial discretion exception for people seeking a name change due to gender-related identity, marriage, religion, and their status as a human trafficking survivor. And that applies to registry bans for sex offenders, arsonists, murder, and violent offender against youth registration act requirements. So that's a lot of technical stuff. I guess one thing I want to share with folks is some of the stories of the folks who we've been working with on these issues. One of the folks who testified in committee shared their experience of they were looking for a new place. They filled out the application. They reached out to the broker online. They set up a meeting to do an appointment. They saw the place and everything was all good. They filled out the paperwork and they had to put their legal name, not the name that's their true name, on the document. And that resulted in that person not getting the home because of discrimination of the person who was renting. We also had another one of the folks who testified in committee talk about how unsafe this law makes her and why we need this bill. She talked about even every day there are different opportunities where she could be outed and be made vulnerable, including going to the doctor's office. And while she may put her name in terms of the name that she wants to be referred to as, the doctor can still call her by her legal name in front of a whole office filled with patients. So that's some of the real life reasons why we really, really need people to take action and get involved to push for this bill to be called. The bill got out of the House. It was sponsored by Rep. Cassidy. It's now in the Senate. It's sponsored by Senator Peters. So calling your senators and ask them to take action would be great. The other bill that didn't quite make it to the finish line was our bill to repeal the Parental Notice of Abortion Act, which requires a healthcare provider to notify an adult family member, so a parent, grandparent, step-parent living in the home or a legal guardian, at least 48 hours before performing an abortion for a patient who's under 18. The law creates a judicial bypass for those who can't notify an adult family member, but from our experience and my experience representing young people, while people may say, oh, there's a way for you to do it without telling your adult family member, that way presents a lot of barriers to young people in terms of getting to a courthouse, in terms of having their privacy respected, especially if you live in a small town and you're going to court. And even as a lawyer, going to court can be intimidating for me. So imagine a young person who is dealing with a health issue to have to navigate the legal process. Even though our judicial bypass project is great, we don't want those barriers to be in place. And we know young people talk to adults that they trust. So my sister may talk to me, not my mom, and I'm an adult who's able to talk with her about these decisions, but we don't think a law should regulate how families communicate with each other, especially for the young people who aren't able to tell their adult family members. So that bill is Senate Bill 2190. Again, call your senators, your reps, and let them know you want this law off the books. And then the last bill is our Bad Apples and Law Enforcement Accountability Act. So this bill would make police officers accountable for their actions when they violate someone's constitutional rights. Specifically, the bill would allow a person to bring a lawsuit in Illinois State Court against a peace officer who, while on duty, violates that person's rights under the Illinois Constitution, and that includes Article 1, Section 6, which prohibits police from using excessive force. By passing this law, claims of constitutional violations by police can be assessed on a case-by-case basis on their merits, and that leads to more just and equitable outcomes for folks who are harmed by law enforcement. And they're also better able to determine, help police departments identify and discipline those officers who violate people's constitutional rights. And that was something that we wanted to be in the Safety Act. It was in and then was pulled out. So this is really, really important work. So if you were on the streets protesting last summer, if you continue to believe that there needs to be a change in law enforcement culture, this is a bill that you all should definitely support. And it's House Bill 1727. It's sponsored by Rep. Tarver in the House and Senator Sims in the Senate. And the last bill I will talk about is the Reducing Barriers to Recovery Initiative, and we call that our defelonization bill. It's House Bill 3447, and that would reclassify small-scale drug possession from a felony to a misdemeanor and enable people to be diverted from the criminal legal systems to community-based treatment. The bill would also allow expungement and retroactive resentencing to help repair the harm of past drug convictions on the lives of people across Illinois. And we think that this legislation is really important as well. And the sponsors of that bill were Rep. Ammons, and that moved out of the House. It's in the Senate with Senator Bush, Melinda Bush. So call your senators about that bill because they definitely need to hear from you.
Sounds like some really important fights still lie ahead, and plenty of opportunities for everyone to engage in this legislation that passed and those that didn't. So kind of along the same lines, what should our supporters look for next in terms of ACLU advocacy? Any sneak peeks to the future?
I think they should look forward to emails about the bills that haven't passed yet, for sure. And they should take action when they get those emails. I know sometimes you're like, does it matter? It actually matters a lot. And our Protecting Household Privacy Act, that was a bill where after we did an action alert, I think our members were super enthusiastic about it. And legislators really talked about getting a lot of emails of support. So your pressing that button makes a huge difference. So those are four of our bills that we're going to be pushing in this veto session.
Yeah, thanks. And just to wrap it all up, is there any other ways you would suggest folks engage in this off season between the next General Assembly and veto session coming up?
Yeah, I think one step is to thank the governor for signing all of the bills that he did. And I'm sure there'll be a fun link in whatever you send to folks so they can do that. Also thanking the legislators who both sponsored the bills and who supported it. That definitely makes a difference for those legislators. If you feel so inclined, do a letter to the editor thanking your legislator for any of the bills that you were supportive of, or asking them to pass the bills that we've identified before. And if you haven't already, please find out who your legislator is so you're able to be in contact with them, so they get to know who you are and get to know that you're an ACLU member and you really care about these important civil liberties issues.
Yeah, and we'll leave some resources below as well. We have a lot of Advocacy 101 on our website, as well as how to find your legislator, how to get involved. So we hope everyone takes action on the bills that passed and the bills that didn't. We have a long fight ahead, but we're looking forward to it. Anything else, Khadine, you want to add before we wrap up?
No, this was fun. Thanks.
Yes. Thanks so much for joining us today.